We have 7 games left in the PWHL schedule until the Olympic break. We're going to talk about the Olympians, especially from the European teams. We're going to get you ready for those last 7 games. But first, Rachel, we're going to talk about the largest trade in PWHL history. My name is Erica L. Ayala. I am the founder and CEO of Black Rosie Media, where At Even Strength, our women's hockey podcast, lives, joined by Rachel Donner, who once again joins me on a women's hockey podcast. Rachel, like I said, we have a jam-packed episode, one of the last that we'll do, covering the PWHL action before the Olympics. But let's get into this trade. I mean, I saw this graphic pop into my mailbox, and I just needed to really sit with this and be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
A big trade here between the Ottawa Charge and the Vancouver Goldeneyes, each getting 3 players. So Michaela Cava, Brooke McQuigge, and Emma Greco go to Ottawa from Vancouver, and Vancouver then receives Mano McMahon, Anna Mexner, and Anna Shokina go to the Goldeneyes. So that's the graphic for those watching on video. Rachel, let's break this down, though. I mean, your first reactions to this blockbuster trade.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would not have expected a big trade like this with 3 players on each side. That's for sure. And I think that the fact that Vancouver was involved, expansion team, and, they were already in a situation where they were putting players together from different teams over the expansion process and looking at, what has worked so far for them and what hasn't worked, to make such a big change already, I think is really interesting from the expansion process perspective here.
Yeah.
Obviously, both teams were in the bottom half of the standings at that time, and they felt like something had to be done. But, I just think it's a lot more interesting from the Vancouver side of things.
Yeah, I would say so as well. And we're actually going to hear from Vancouver and from Ottawa in their games post-trade, Rachel. But we know that something had to give with Vancouver in particular. Now, Ottawa, they've been down this road before, right? A little bit on, a little bit off. So, but again, they've also been down this road before when it comes to midseason trades. And it boded all right for them last year in being able to get to a championship series. But, now they triple up the trade, and maybe that will help them get over the hump. Jokes aside, though, I think you're right. Like, for me, it was just a matter of, this is a lot of movement for teams like you were saying, that need to be able to get a stronghold in the standings, and they need to be able to win games outright in regulation to be able to do that. And so it was really interesting to hear from Vancouver, who played at the time we were recording the night before, on Thursday, the 22nd, January 22nd. And just feeling like, they knew that they needed to have some urgency, but there wasn't necessarily that panic that had set in. And there were very specific things that the team overall has been focused on, and that these players, this crop of players, can help them with, as far as, one, just kind of keeping things simple. I think we heard the team talk about a lot, but then also playing, honestly, a little more hard and intentionally hard. So what does that mean? Like 50-50 puck battles on the forecheck. How are they playing? Things like that.
Yeah. And when we talked about the expansion process, we said that Vancouver looked incredible on paper, but
yeah.
Right. But we saw they had some big challenges trying to put it together. Now, obviously, Sarah Nurse being out was a big part of why maybe it wasn't as strong as you would have expected earlier in the season. But still, there just was some disconnect going on with Vancouver's play. And Cara Morey decided that getting some more of that grit was, I think, important to complementing the skill they have. And this trade certainly does that for them.
Yeah, 100%. And then on the Ottawa side, I think this is a team that they can score up there among some of the top teams in scoring. They let up a lot of goals though. And I think that the MO for Ottawa Charge in now leading into this third season has been that discipline. And I know that you were able to be at the game, right? The first
Yes.
Ottawa Charge game since the trade. So we did see, and just to recap, I'm going to put the graphic back up. So all 6 of these players dressed for their new respective teams. We will talk about that a little bit more. But all 6 players dressed and were active. But let's talk about Ottawa, then we'll hear from Ottawa. But in seeing what this Ottawa Charge team needed, even in this game, they go to overtime and they eventually get the win against the Sirens, but they blow a 3-goal lead.
Yeah, it was a tough one. Now, of course, there was going to be some like feeling each other out in terms of integrating the new players into the team, but I don't think that's what led to the Sirens being able to get back into it. That was more of the Sirens stepping it up,
right?
And Ottawa getting overwhelmed to some degree with the rushes in that game. But one thing that I did notice in particular in that post-game media availability is that Carla Macleod was beaming, looking at Brooke at the table. Like, honestly, like, and she said, in paraphrasing her, that they had done their homework in terms of the players that they acquired, and they had specific roles and needs that were being met by these 3 players. And Brooke in particular, had a particular role to play, but that they were so excited to have these 3 players. I think Michaela is obviously like the more marquee player of the 3, but still, like, all 3 of them were going to be integral to this team moving forward. And I think coming away with a win when all was said and done was really important toward that effort.
Yeah, 100%. And so speaking of, Carla Macleod, let's hear from Carla and Brooke post-game, talking a little bit about integrating new players. What's the ask, right, when you have new players? And just, we'll give this to you a little bit, but both coaches effectively talking about, at the end of the day, these are professionals, right? And that they acted as such. But again, this is the post game that you were referring to. Just a quick snippet, of a little over a minute, hearing from Brooke and from head coach for Ottawa, Carla Macleod.
Yeah, honestly, all the girls have been extremely welcoming and made it super easy to kind of get everything streamlined and get going. I'm just really honored to be a part of this group and get the opportunity in this organization and just start to mesh with the rest of my teammates and kind of build a foundation there. Yeah, I think today just the mindset was go out there and have fun and play hockey, and just show up ready today to work hard, because obviously it was a quick turnaround from the time I found out till the time I got on the plane and then arrived here last night. So just show up, work hard, and have fun, which I thought it was a lot of fun today.
Yeah, we'd obviously done a lot of homework on their game and where we thought they could help our group, and I thought all 3 really did a really nice job, because as Brooke has said, like, the variables haven't been ideal from a travel perspective and a tight turnaround, but these gals are pro, and you could see it tonight. They didn't really miss a beat. We wanted them to just go in and play. We thought we could figure things out beyond that, but I was really proud of all of them and our group, and how our group sort of engulfed them and said, yeah, just play our style, we got you. And it's exciting to build with the group that we've got here.
Exactly what you were saying, Rachel, there.
Yeah. Well, I asked that first question, so that's why I knew the answer.
See, I didn't even realize. Sometimes it's hard to hear the question, so I didn't even notice that was you. Not planned, but there we go. I think that, you see that. And that's a lot of times what trades are. I think trades are kind of like the adult sport version of like being sent to the principal's office. Like, that's how people view it still, like, right, you're getting traded, when sometimes it's necessary for the team and sometimes for individual players to get that reset, to get that focus. And yes, the logistics are a little bit chaotic at times, and that reset, that opportunity to just get a fresh start and know that that first game, the first few shifts, no one's asking for you to score 1 million goals or to get an MPP spinorama goal, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit here. But it's just like, play your game, like get back to your basics. And so it worked out for Ottawa. It was an overtime game here, but they get the 4-3 win. So they get some points here on the board. But again, getting those points outright is going to be huge. Outshot Ottawa was by the New York Sirens 34-21. And in the first and third frame, pretty heavily there. So this is a charged team that we know they can score.
Yeah.
And they also have a propensity of getting scored on. So they just have to be able to balance that out. And as McLeod also said, right, there have been times where they're not giving Phillips the opportunity to make the saves, the easy save, right? We know she can make the tough saves, but they put a lot of pressure on Phillips by not doing some of the things that they need to do. So she also alluded to that, which we've talked about before with this Ottawa team.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that it was very clear in that game in particular that none of what happened was on Phillips. I mean, she was standing on her head the entirety, especially in that third period where it was just coming fast and furious. And, I think that like nobody would put any of it on her. It was more on the defensive structure breakdowns and the Sirens making a really fantastic push. So, I think we know, because like I posted during that game, I'm like, Gwyneth Phillips is doing Gwyneth Phillips things tonight.
She does, right? Exactly. And so can this be the type of turnaround that is needed? And that's the question that we're also asking, Rachel, of this Vancouver team. Now, we've seen Vancouver score in bunches a handful of times, and that's exactly what they did. A 5-0 rout of the Toronto Scepters Toronto had a tough week because they also lost a 6-4 game to Seattle. So, this was just a game, though, that if we're thinking about, again, the teams impacted by this trade, Rachel, Vancouver needed this game, right? They needed a game where they could show up offensively, get points outright by winning in regulation. And we know that Sarah Nurse has made her return and you're really starting to see her vibe with this team. But also, again, we saw all three players that were part of this trade dress for the Goldeneyes. And I didn't actually put this on the screen, but we saw McQuigge, who we heard from, with Hughes and Clark, Kava with Mrazova there on the right side, and so I think that, but then looking at Vancouver as well, you see that they have, they have the three new players involved with Mexner on that third line with Rosenthal, and Boreen, and then McMahon and Shokina on that fourth line together. This, again, a Vancouver team, they needed some points here, Rachel. They were able to get it done.
They certainly did. It was a tremendous effort by Vancouver in that game. And, like you said, Sarah Nurse was a huge part of it, right? Yeah. With 2 goals in the game. But, I think that getting her first of the season was extremely important there, and then getting support from everybody else and the defensive play. I mean, that is crucial, right, in order for Vancouver to have a fighting chance.
100%, and that has been missed a little too often. I thought it was so interesting, though, because I feel like we've talked about this before, right, with Seattle and Vancouver, to be honest, and always with Ottawa, but how much of sticking to the game plan when you get so deep into the season, is sticking to the game plan the responsible thing or the irresponsible thing? And I felt like, yes, the injury to Nurse, huge impact, but it was like, if we're not seeing adjustments, is maybe sticking to the game plan the problem in Vancouver? And I don't know that that's necessarily the question that the team was answering, but what they did focus on is keeping it simple, Rachel. And so we're going to go to a clip in just a minute here, because that's what Sarah, but also Brian Idalski talk about. Like, they just had to keep it simple.
Yeah.
So here's the clip here. We're going to hear, you'll see that Campbell is on the dais along with Vanishova, but we're going to hear Sarah Nurse speaking. To your point, Vanishova getting her first goal, a shutout, of course, for Soupy. And then we'll hear from Brian Idalski, where he talks about effectively the team keeping it simple, including the new players.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty crazy week, and I mean, we definitely missed the girls who we traded away, but I think that the three we've been able to add in Shoksy, Mikesy, and Manon, like, they've added to our team in a way that I don't think that we can really describe. I think that they provided depth, energy, fast transition offense that we desperately needed on this team, and them coming in, they've played some pretty important minutes for us in this last game, and I definitely think that it showed, and it really helped our team in a crazy way.
Up on that, Anna Meixner had a couple good chances tonight. Didn't quite find the back of the net, but really noticed her. Like, what did you see from her tonight?
She got her first point, which is awesome. I mean, she's heavy, like kind of like T, like she's heavy on a forecheck. She makes little slip plays, little chips, and I think she's just hard on pucks. We need to be better playing at the blue lines, the red lines, and getting pucks in, and I think that she really, really does that. She's like kind of a little bit of a spark plug on that third line with Gabby and Bobo, and I've really liked what I've seen from her so far. And I mean, like, she's like a ray of sunshine, like coming to the rink, she's always smiling, and so she's definitely a great pickup for us.
Two things. I thought that it was pretty visible, the team speed and the increase in some of that, and allowed us to really forecheck pretty hard, which is something we've been kind of working on a little bit. And so the thing about them is the flexibility in the lineup. Like, they can kind of plug in a lot of different spots, and so looking forward to seeing what that looks like going forward. But I thought they did a great job after getting in a couple skates, and definitely brought some good energy for us. They're pro players, and there's pro experience for all three of them for, an extended period of time. So yeah, we really sat down with them and kind of went through everything that we're trying to do and what some of the structure is, and it wasn't completely unfamiliar to them. So it's not like we're plugging in three rookies who haven't played pro hockey. So I think that made it a little bit easier. And like I said, they did a great job, speed-wise, compete-wise, grit, and just positive energy. So it was good all the way around. We need to keep that going.
I love it. I mean, to summarize, sandpaper and positivity, right?
Yeah. I think an underappreciated part of that game for Vancouver, especially related to what Coach Idalski was just saying in terms of adding grit and with them working on their forecheck, that was a very clean game. Ooh. So in the second and third period, there was only one penalty called over the course of the entirety of the second and third period, and it was on Vancouver. So they had a PK that they had to kill off, but they got no power plays in that second and third period and managed to score those 5 goals.
Yeah.
And with added physicality and that extra forechecking that they were doing with new players that you're trying to integrate, sometimes mistakes get made. Yep. Right. In terms of, accidentally tripping someone or boarding or something along those lines. That game was very, very clean for them. And that was one of the more impressive things about that effort for me.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, right, the promise on paper that we kind of see.
Yep.
That has taken a little bit of time. And yeah, to your point, when you have to keep it simple, you have to keep it clean, even in just how you're communicating, or the fact that you need to communicate on the ice with players that are integrating themselves into your system for the first time. Again, it's a reset, not just for the players that are a part of the movement, but the players that are already on the roster. And it seems like that move was a good one. And who knows? I mean, we might see other moves here. We know that we have the Olympic break coming up, but also, you know, the trade deadline is at the end of March. So there's plenty of time here for these teams to figure out what they need to do, or as we heard Brian Idalski say, to kind of crack the code of what their team is going to look like. And for Vancouver, that was taking the less is more approach. Again, focusing on, I loved that Sarah Nurse talked about, you know, one of her new teammates in McMahon just playing hard. And also bringing something like what Vanishova can bring and getting that throughout the lineup, which we heard from Coach Idalski, that there's a plug and play element to all of the players that they added, I think is really interesting. It's intriguing. Also, I don't know if it's just me, Rachel, but hearing Nursey talk, I was like, I see a future in either broadcast or coaching, maybe both, depending, because just the way she was just succinctly, but also very informatively able to break that down, I thought was like phenomenal. I mean, obviously she's had a lot of media training, you can tell.
Yeah, she knows how to talk about the game.
She knows how to talk the game for sure. And that, of course, comes because of her college, pro, and Olympic experience, Rachel. We know that Sarah Nurse was added to that Hockey Canada roster. We talked about that last time we had an episode. We were a little bit concerned because of the injury, but obviously she had a brace in that game against her former team. So she seems to be feeling all right. That's good news for Hockey Canada. We've also, of course, gone over the U.S. roster, but we got some numbers in, Rachel. We're not going to break down US and Canada as much because we've done that before, but here are just some numbers to consider and ponder as we go into the Olympics, which Black Rosie Media will be boots on the ground, and then we'll have people like Rachel and Ava Wood contributing stateside. But 61 players across 8 different countries in a 10-team field. That's 30% of the PWHL that, and we're just talking players because, of course, there's also staff, which we'll talk about in a minute. But 30% of the league will be competing in the Olympics.
Yeah, that number is huge. Yeah. I think that shows to the strength of the league for sure. I think that it probably, 2 years ago would have been, if a similar event was taking place, it would have been a lot smaller because we've certainly seen a lot more European players come over as the league has proven itself as a viable place to play. So, we're getting into territory where this is the league if you're going to play, and we may get to a point where the percentage goes up as these other national organizations improve their individual country federations.
Yes, I think that's a part of it. And, we've pondered this off camera, and I think we want to do a little more deep diving. But, a lot of the conversation around women's hockey for the last handful of seasons, and really 2, let's say, probably more conservatively, but let's say 2 Olympic cycles, has been, can one women's hockey league truly field competitive hockey? And that's why we started with, only 6 teams in the PWHL. But to see that 30% of the league is represented across 8 different countries at an Olympics, I think, I wonder if we're a little bit beyond the conversation that women's hockey cannot be competitive with, more than 6 teams, because I don't think that's the case. We've even talked about it, right? Yeah, we have some bottom dwellers. You're always going to have bottom dwellers in the standings, but the standings, even among the teams at the bottom, you get one game outright and you jump multiple spots. And I think it's a farce to say that that's only driven by North American Olympic talent. Not to mention that there are players, including from other countries outside of North America, thus the United States and Canada, that did not make these Olympic rosters, that are still competing or are very much able to compete in the PWHL. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Also, if you have a league, like it is obvious that there are going to be teams that aren't as good in a league.
Right.
Like, that's okay. That's sports. There are teams at the bottom of standings that aren't as good. We accept that in men's sports. Why is it a ding on a women's league that you have to have all like extremely elite athletes, and you can't have any bad teams because then it proves that your league is bad and not worthy. Like, no,
because in men's sports, what do we talk about? Oh, like San Jose Sharks, they've been team tank and defense is for nerds for the beginning of time, as far as I'm concerned. But but those are the things. That's strategy, right? If you're a bad men's team, it's strategic. If you're a bad women's team, then you are defiling the sanctity of sports overall. So
and there aren't enough good players to play.
Right. It's like, clearly this is why women should not sport. Anyway. We have thoughts, so we'll circle back to some of those, especially as we see the competition play out in Italy. And again, we will be boots on the ground. We're excited to bring you coverage. That's why we've got our special Milano Cortina logo. And I showed Rachel our pins. We have Olympic pins this year that we're going to be sharing. So if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, Gold Medal Dispatch, go ahead and do that, because that's the only way, unless you're on Black Rosie Media staff or at the Olympics, to get one of our Olympic pins. Okay.
I do want to say that I am very much looking forward to this boots on the ground coverage of the rink and the ice and everything, because we hear about it more related to the men's tournament, but the women's play first.
Exactly.
So
if it's not going to be ready for the men's tournament, then it's definitely not going to be ready on February 5th, which is our first slate of games. But we'll have all of that coverage, and we'll be, our boots might literally be in the dirt on the ground. Who knows what the press box will look like?
Maybe they'll ask you to participate in the flush test in the building.
Oh my goodness. Yes, that is definitely another part that you're not going to want to miss. So make sure you are locked in on Black Rosie Media, and At Even Strength, of course, is a Black Rosie Media podcast. You can follow this podcast at Even Strength _pod on TikTok in particular. But let's move through a few of these other demographics. Now, we've talked about the rosters as they've come in, Rachel, but we now have, again, these overarching numbers, and we can kind of pull back here. So I do want to mention we have 3 players across the board, as far as I know. I think I got this right, but Marie-Philippe Poulin, Hilary Knight, and Michelle Karvinen all going to their 5th Olympic Games. Now, we know that for Hilary Knight, she has officially announced that this will be her last international competition in Milano Cortina. We don't know about MPP and Karvinen yet, but again, being in that company with Knighter as a 5-time Olympian going into their 5th Olympic Games, I can only imagine they'll be asked a million gazillion times about that. But I mean, these are icons. These are living legends. They are our first ballot Hall of Famers, or they need to be. And when they're all up, Hockey Hall of Fame, don't do the thing where you limit how many women can go in at the same time. They all need to go in immediately, ASAP. But thoughts on Karvinen, MPP, and Hilary Knight being able to really carry this banner, and perhaps Rachel kind of closing the door on this super young talent cutting their teeth, in their teen years. And maybe we're switching to a model where it's more you cut your teeth as a pro, and that's how you get on the Olympic roster.
Yeah. We went through it last time with Canada and the US, including college players in Canada not, and what that means in terms of the development of the program overall and the longevity of the program. Not that Canada doesn't have a phenomenal team, because they do, and they may end up winning the gold medal, but what will that mean for it longer term, and the ability of, younger players to get integrated to that squad?
Yeah, exactly. And I know we definitely got a lot of comments on TikTok about that, including, people saying, oh, well, that's what World Juniors are for. I'm sorry, that's what it's for the men. World Juniors who? World Juniors where? We've talked about that before, you and I. There are no World Juniors for women. So yeah, the development comes through the Senior National Team World Championships. And yes, Yes, the Olympics. But we digress. Let's keep moving through. I mentioned staff. So Carla Macleod, I think a lot of people know, is still the Team Czechia head coach. But then you have Danielle Savanjo, the general manager for Team Italy, and is bringing some of her staff along. Kyle, who is the director of analytics. And for those who've been around women's hockey for a while, then you know that analytics in women's hockey, there's a whole subculture, and for good reason, because we've been trying and fighting to get more analytics for women's hockey. Montreal, even in the PHF, starting to have an actual staff and department focused on analytics, and bringing that to Italy is super exciting. We also have Alex Tremblay, who is a skills coach, all three working in Montreal. That's Savanjo, again, Hockey Hall of Famer, Mikhail and Alex, that are coming from the Montreal squad as far as staff. But it's 23 players. We've talked about this. Every single player, Rachel, and you alluded to this, every single player from Hockey Canada's roster is playing in the PWHL, including 6 players making their debut: Daryl Watts, Jen Gardner, Kristen O'Neill, Julia Gosling, Katie Tabin, Sophie Jakes, and Kaylee Osborne. The United States has 16 PWHL players, 11 debuts, but only 7 of those 11 are PWHL players. But we also know a big storyline, of course, is Laila Edwards, who is making an Olympic debut, will be making Olympic history, first Black woman to make a U.S. Olympic squad, but is not yet a PWHL player. Maybe could she potentially be a number 1 pick and then join Kelsey Kolzer as far as first Black athlete in hockey to go number 1? Well, we gotta figure all that out. But let's see how Kayla and company do in the Olympics. And we've talked about Finland before. Karvinen Tapani, I'm a huge Susanna Tapani fan, is going to be there. Rania Savalainen, and then Sunny Ahola, the goalie, is going to be making her Olympic debut. For Czechia, lots of players here, including Kulti, who I know you get to see very often for the New York Sirens. She is the only Team Czech player that has PWHL ties that's making her Olympic debut. Katarzyna Mrazova, Tarisa Vanisheva, Aneta Terelova will be set to, or is named to that roster, but has been day-to-day for Seattle, so we're going to have to keep eyes on that. I don't know that we talked about Germany too much, so we're going to, we're going to focus a little bit more on them, but Laura Klug from Boston, Nina Smith from Vancouver, and then Sandra Abstreiter from Montreal, all 3 making their Olympic debut.
Yeah, that's like the breadth of all of these players on these other teams making their debut or returning. I think just adding to the cachet of the PWHL on all of these teams. And I think making some of these other teams more competitive, because as you know, all these players continue to grow and develop in the PWHL, it elevates their game. It only naturally does. And like bringing that back to their national teams, I think, obviously Canada and the United States are the marquee teams here, but I think it makes the other games, like in between these other countries, a lot more fun and a lot more competitive.
Yes, 100%. And hopefully that means the conversation continues, because another thing is we've never really seen the Olympics spark a North American pro league the way that everyone anticipated and expected. Now, I think there's some things baked in about women in sports that we've alluded to, because it's not really happened in basketball or soccer either. For those who follow the NWSL, the WNBA, and have been following for several Olympic and World Cup, World Championship cycles, you know that the crossover is not really there. And some of it, I think it's the collective we of sports media in North America, and that North American exceptionalism, where we have players that are playing in these North American leagues that are from other countries, and we don't do the storytelling in the lead up as much as we could. I think that's a part of it. But then also, if people love rivalries, whether you want to talk about heated rivalry or just rivalries in the WNBA have been a thing. We're seeing rivalries promoted in sports in a really big way. A really great way to beef up rivalries is like, friend turned foe, or, teammate now on the other side of the face-off dot. Those things have always existed in sports. So I'm very curious to see, not only will Black Rosie Media be there, but I think the PWHL through their podcast, right, is also going to have some boots on the ground. So hopefully this is a way to really continue that. And that's always been a mission and a vision of Black Rosie Media, and what you and I, Rachel, have done since we've been covering women's hockey together. So I'm excited to see that and to be a part of that wave, and glad some other folks are joining along. And then we have Kristen Della Rovere for Toronto representing Italy. So we have some staff that we've talked about from Montreal that will be heading up or supporting Team Italy, which is the host nation. The host nation of Italy will be in Group B alongside Sweden, Germany, France, and Japan. Group A includes Canada, the United States, Finland, Czechia, and Switzerland. So
yeah. And I just want to note about the Italian team. It's like, you think, oh, they are the host country, so they automatically get a team in the Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. They automatically get a spot. This team moved up from Group 1B to 1A this past year. So like at World Championships, they'll be competing in the division just below the main women's worlds group here. So, is it going to be an uphill battle for them? Yes, but I'm interested to see like how they match up given that.
I think it's a great point. And we've seen that there are some teams knocking at the door. I mean, Germany has been one of those that we've seen be able to get in better position. Austria has been right there on the cusp a few different times, still trying to get over that hump. So yeah, I think it's a great point. And again, it's a larger field for the women's tournament with 10 teams. We're very eager to see how this all plays out. But before all of that, Rachel, we have 7 games before the Olympic break. Myself and all the Olympians will be traveling out late next week as we get ready for this tournament. The women's tournament will start on February 5th. We have a countdown on Black Rosie Media. Follow us on all social media channels. We'll have some great storytelling, including some story about Black Olympic history, not just in ice hockey, but throughout all of the Olympics. So we can't wait to do that, because next month is indeed Black History Month. So we're looking forward to that overlap. But before we get there, and we know some teams have celebrated Black Hockey History Month and other cultural celebrations. We have 7 games on the slate. We're going to talk about, let's just talk about the field here. So we've talked obviously a lot about Ottawa and Vancouver in this episode. Both of these teams have 2 games before the Olympic break. Ottawa is at Montreal on Saturday, January 24th, and then they host Seattle on the 28th. That's a Wednesday. Then for Vancouver, they're on the road in Denver to take on Seattle. I've talked with Ava Wood on our Seattle Torrent specific podcast about this. A little bummed that the next installment of the battle, talk about rivalries, the battle of the expansion teams is not at Climate Pledge Arena. Like they
not in either of this.
No, they're going to neutral site. They're like, hey, we've got 2 new expansion teams. Let's send them to a city that's probably going to get one in the next round, which is interesting. I mean, I get it from a overall marketing of the league perspective. It's just a little tough, I think, for those Seattle fans and honestly Vancouver fans, because that's a pretty, it's a doable drive or flight to get from Vancouver to Seattle.
Vancouver to Seattle. Yeah.
Yes, Vancouver to Seattle.
I thought you were like Vancouver to Denver. I'm like, I've done that drive, and it's like 18 hours.
No, Vancouver to Seattle. My point being that if the game is in Vancouver or Seattle, the fan base can still get to either.
Although it does make sense. I think we were alluding to this from a rivalry standpoint, because if Denver is going to get a team, these are going to be some of the top rivals that they'll see, right?
Yeah, very true. Yes, because of the catchment area regionally. So, but Vancouver, that's their first game. Their second game, it's on that last day, the 28th, before the break. They take on, this is going to be a really good test for them, because Minnesota is looking fierce. All right. They're looking pretty freaking fierce.
They did lose that game because of the magic of MPP, but
oh my gosh,
they're still playing generally very well.
Yes. I mean, I mean, everyone's going to get MPP'd every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's just that good. But yeah, speaking of Montreal, they have 2 games as well. The aforementioned taking on Ottawa on Saturday, and then they take on Toronto, which is always a good matchup. Boston, it has just the 1 game. So they will host the Sirens. The Sirens will also take on Minnesota in St. Paul on January 25th. Toronto, as I mentioned, will take on Montreal. That's their only game. And then Seattle will take on Vancouver, but then again, we'll play Ottawa. When you look at this slate, is there a quote unquote, and I use this a little bit more for the fun of entertainment than being literal, because I hate like a literal must-win game is like, you know, a game 7 or like a game 4 if you're down 0-3. But my point is, if we were to buy into the hype of must-win games at this point in the season, what's a game that you think a team really needs to be able to get on the board here if they can get a win, especially in regulation, Rachel?
I mean, it's got to be that Toronto game against Montreal, right? If you're talking must win to even have a chance to move up, Toronto's got to win that game.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Toronto, like we have alluded to, they fall into, as far as standings points, into 6th place, 17 points, right on their heels. Vancouver and Seattle both sitting at 16. They're behind Ottawa, who has 19 points there. So yeah, to your point, yeah, absolutely. That's a game there. I think also Vancouver, they have honestly both of their games. I think they really need to have a good showing. It's more of a statement game, I think, Rachel, to see if they can get the win against Minnesota. But when you have a team like Seattle, again, it's already a built-in rivalry. You enter the league in the same year, you're playing on the West Coast, and yeah, they're the bottom dwellers here. But like we heard Sarah Nurse say, getting a win outright and being able to move up in the standings is huge. And they sit, as far as points are, they sit equal and level with Seattle at 16 points. Now they have more losses outright, 7 losses for Vancouver comparative to 5 for the Torrent. But I think that's, again, if we're really going to use that term must win for Vancouver, if we're talking from the Vancouver perspective, it's a must win. But I think you could say the same for Seattle. You don't want to lose to a team that you're kind of neck and neck with and have been. You want to be able to get that separation, because it kind of works twofold. If you get all the points, that means you keep your opponent off the board altogether. Because, you know, at least in that head to head. So I kind of like that game or those games for Vancouver. But again, you know, the added bonus of that rivalry game being at a place where we're expecting will be named sooner rather than later as an expansion team. We saw that Washington, D.C. showed up and showed out. And yes, MPP put on a show in order to get that win. It was a little bit dicey, though, and I want to ask you from the New York Sirens perspective, because that game in DC, largest game in the United States, so another record-setting crowd. Everyone was super excited to have DC be represented. I mean, the DC had a great week in women's sports. I'm thinking takeover tour stop, and then Trinity Rodman signing the largest ever contract to the tune of $3 million, was it? Something insane like that. So it was a big weekend for DC women's sports, but 4-game suspension for Taylor Gerard.
Yep.
And a lot of people talking about that means we need more fighting in hockey. First of all, she did not get a 4-game suspension because she fought, Rachel. It was something much more mundane, but also that we see across all sports, and that is a suspension for leaving the bench.
Yeah, and you know, letter of the law, that was the right suspension. But I think that when you look at league discipline, you know, it's been like 1 game, 2 games, right? And because of the overall number of games in the schedule being a lot less than in the NHL, they're looking at it in a mentality of percentage of the season that these players are being missed, who are being disciplined, right?
Mhm.
And so when you have it's in the rule book, 4 games for leaving the bench, that is such a high percentage of the season.
Yep.
And should be a deterrent. But when you have relatively like headshots being a 1-game suspension or time served from a game misconduct or something like that, like it just feels wrong because of the relative impact of those suspensions.
Yeah, and also like it was the skirmish was literally as the seconds were just coming off of the clock. And I don't know. I don't know if that should make a difference, if it shouldn't make a difference, because to your point, letter of the law, we see it in all sports. You don't leave the bench, especially when there's a skirmish.
Right.
Like, that's just in sports, it's a high suspension because they want to eliminate that action from happening. End of the game, though. And then a player like Taylor Girard, you look at her stats now, 13 games played, 5 goals, 1 assist. And now, because of the suspension, 30 penalty minutes. And if I'm not mistaken, Rachel, 20 of those 30 came from that single action alone.
No, I know. I will say the Sirens fans are on Taylor's side. That is for sure. There were a large number of free Taylor or free Girard signs at that last game in New York. There was my favorite was support women's rights and women's wrongs sign. That's like her number on the
oh my goodness
there. And then there was like at the 17th minute of the period, they were chanting like free TG, which I thought was funny. Like, but
they came ready to support their own.
They did.
I mean, yeah, it's brutal. I think we can say that. It's brutal, and it's going to be a tough loss for a Girard who you and I have talked about this before. I didn't really like how she was being utilized in her first year in New York, not a full season, but I think that she was kind of cajoled into penalty killing special teams. Where if Taylor Girard and her rookie debut in the PHF with the Connecticut Whale, this is someone who can be dynamic on the power play as well, like true power forward, such strength, great hands, great skill. So it's a tough loss. It's a tough loss.
And we'd been seeing a ton of her skill on display in the season up until that point.
Yep. So a tough one. I know we've alluded to it a few times, but Marie-Philippe Poulin, I mean, and you brought up something interesting. So are we just desensitized? Are we so used to MPP greatness that it does not raise higher into the hockey conversation? Because we had an insane goal from Abby Murphy, right? Where it was like a basketball, soccer / football move on a hockey rink, like on ice.
Well, I mean, it was an assist, but still.
Well,
a highlight reel assist, right? And doing an incredible move. And, MPP scoring that spinorama goal to win that game was incredible, right? But it's like, oh, that's just Marie-Philippe Poulin. Like, it's no big, right?
MPP.
And like, I feel like she needs to get her due a little bit more. Because it is special. It should remain special each and every time she does it.
Absolutely, because it's insane. Like that was, I mean, you want to talk about, sometimes you talk about like hope, HOPE passes. That was like, for anyone else, that's a hope shot on goal. Like you're just hoping to get that, puck in deep, as we say, as we hear said in hockey. But the fact that she had enough torque, enough accuracy to just clean on the backhand, right? Blind backhand shot. Like, I don't even know. That was insane. But it is interesting that the Murphy assist, yes, it was an assist. It was an insane assist. But an assist versus...
But she's also that good. That's the thing.
True. And so we're not saying it's one or the other, insert...
Why not both?
Media platform that is not Black Rosie Media. Talk about them both. Talk about it. We want all the highlights. You don't have to tap out and with just one women's hockey highlight, per 7 days. But MPP is a beast. cannot wait to cover her at the Olympics. But yeah, I think that'll do, Rachel. Like I said, we have 7 games on deck before the Olympics. And I guess our next episode, right? We will be able to recap those games and then get you ready for Milano Cortina. So you're not going to want to miss that. If you're not already subscribed on our YouTube channel, which is Black Rosie Media, go ahead and do that. Hit the notification bell. And you can also look for the Milano Cortina playlist. So anytime we've been referencing Milano Cortina in the past month or so, but of course, when we're in Italy, those are the videos you're going to want to watch for our Olympic coverage. And again, we have a great team that's going to be supporting us. Joe Dabney and I will be in Italy. Then we have Ava Wood and Rachel Donner, who will help us from the States. But my name, once again, Erica L. Ayala, and for Rachel Donner, thank you for listening to At Even Strength. This is our women's hockey podcast on Black Rosie Media, where we empower Black women and melanated creators in sports media. All right, until the next episode, ciao, Bella.